Hi everyone. Want to welcome Emily Carter to our group today. So Emily has been involved in our group before, and it's great to have her back. She's been our author for the day, and I remember at the time there was a lot of interest in her book, so that's why I asked her to come back and have an interview with me so we can talk to her a little bit more. So, Emily is a critically acclaimed Amazon best-selling author of suspense novels, and her most recent release is Reviving the Hawthorne Sisters, which publishes weekly, called A Refreshingly Modern Gothic Tale. After graduating from Auburn with a Bachelor of Arts in Speech Communication, she moved to New York City. She worked as an actor, producer, screenwriter, and behind the scenes soap opera assistant. She was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, and she now lives in Atlanta, Georgia with her family. So thanks so much, Emily, for joining us. Just
I'm,
wondering
I'm
if
so
you,
happy to be here.
yeah,
Thank you for having
no
me.
thanks. And wondering if you want to start off by telling us a little bit about Reviving the Hawthorne Sisters.
Sure, absolutely. So it's Reviving the Hawthorne Sisters is kind of like a follow-up sort of prequel blend to the first book I wrote called Burying the Honeysuckle Girls. And some of the same characters intersect. I took one of the characters from that book, Honeysuckle Girls. Her name was Dove, and I decided to tell Dove's story. So it's a dual timeline. The present timeline is about Dove's granddaughter, and she has grown up having this kind of strangely famous celebrity grandmother who was a faith healer back in the day,
Mm,
back in like the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and so she's gained this sort of following. But Eve, the main character, knows that her grandmother Dove had a secret, which was she was a fraud. She was a con woman. And
mm,
so Eve has had to sort of keep this secret and support the family business and the family foundation. And she finds out that not only was Dove lying about her miraculous healing powers, but she discovers too that her grandmother might have been a thief and a murderer. And
mm,
so she goes on this journey to sort of uncover the real story of Dove, her grandmother.
mm.
And I go into that story and switch back and forth.
Mm.
So,
And I've
yeah.
just recently read it on my Kindle, and and did find it really, really interesting. The different, like, probably something that I haven't read about a lot with the faith healing and all that. So
Yeah.
found that really intriguing. Just wondering, like, what sort of research did you have to do to find out about that sort of thing?
Well, I also find it extremely interesting, and especially it started to really make sense to me that during the Great Depression, it was almost like these people were like, equivalent to like Instagram celebrities or who, I mean, they were the traveling showmen,
Mm,
these faith healers that went around, and they were able to actually make a lot of money during the depression. And people were looking for hope, and they were looking for a way out of their circumstances. And so a lot of these people were trying to help, and then some of course were preying on these really needy, desperate people. But yeah, I
mm,
did a ton of reading about a lot of characters, a lot of there was, Amy Semple McPherson was like a really, really famous. She was like as famous as the biggest movie star in the day. She had this huge
okay.
temple out in
Yeah.
Los Angeles. And,
Mm,
so it was really kind of fascinating blend of religion and showmanship. putting on a big show.
Mm.
So it was really kind of fascinating.
And I've had a couple of people, Vivi and Belinda, they're both asking, as you took the characters from the Honeysuckle book, can you read Reviving the Hawthorne Sisters without reading the other one? And I'll have
Oh
to
yeah,
say, yeah, and I have to say, that's what I did. I haven't read your other book, and I didn't feel really like I'd missed, well, I didn't notice I'd missed anything.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, you don't need to at all. You don't need, I mean, I reference a few things, but you absolutely, the two stories are completely separate. So
Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
it's not like they're part of a series. They're just loosely, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And could you tell us a little bit about how you became an author? Is it something you always thought you wanted to do? And how easy or hard was it for you to get that first book published?
Yeah, I loved reading as a kid, and I would always try to start writing books. I was very attracted to that, but it never occurred to me that I could grow up and be a writer. Like, I
Mm.
don't know, I just, even as a like older teenager, I just kind of thought, well, those people live in New York and they know people, and I don't know
Mm.
anyone in the publishing industry, so it just didn't compute with me. um, but I did always enjoy writing, and when I moved to New York and started working in the television industry, I did come in contact with writers, and I started to see how they worked, and I kind of dipped my toe into that a little bit, and really thought what I wanted to do was write screenplays for movies.
Mm.
That turned out to be a really hard business to break into. And so this was like, I had kids by then. I was in my 40s. Like, I was in my early to mid 40s. And I was like, I think I'm going to write a book instead. And I started
Mm.
researching about the publishing industry, and it just felt more open than the movie industry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wrote 2 books before writing my third, and my third was the book that I found an agent with.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
yeah, so it was many years of
Yeah.
like kind of figuring out what I was doing, and how the industry worked, and just trying to find that, the genre that where I belonged, and so it was hard. I mean, I had a lot of rejections
Yeah.
um, from agents, and then later from editors before I hit that one. But like they said, you only need one.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And Vivi's saying that as you also have worked in producing and that, you did say that you thought about writing a screenplay. Have you, now that you've had some books published, have you ever thought about making any of your books into a movie?
Well, I would love for somebody else to do it,
Yeah.
somebody who has a lot of money, because
Mm.
that's the thing. It's not expensive to write a book,
Mm.
but it is very expensive to make a movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what I'm working on now, and which is kind of been really exciting, is that I want to adapt one of my books to a stage play.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I'd love to produce a stage play. That's kind of
Mm.
off in the future. I've just started working on it, but
Mm.
yeah, a little more affordable than a movie, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That
but
sounds
yeah,
interesting.
somebody else wants to buy one of my books
Yeah.
and make a $50 million movie. Have at it.
Yeah. And Belinda's wondering if you're writing something new at the moment.
Yeah, I am. I am working on another kind of gothic book about. It's difficult to describe, but it is about a woman who may or may not be a ghost.
Okay.
definitely believes she's a ghost.
Yeah.
And she is drawn to an abandoned house, and then a couple of other people are also drawn to this house, and you find out like what ties them all together and what happened to make this young woman who she is.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's so hard to describe. Anytime I talk to people about it, they're like, I don't really get that, but we trust you.
Yeah.
Okay.
How far along are you with that?
Well, I'm probably like a couple of I finished it. And now I'm just working on revisions.
Okay.
So I'm not sure when it's going to come out.
Yeah. And will we see any of the other characters from the Hawthorne sisters coming into any more of your books in the future?
I don't know. I don't have a plan for that yet. There is a character who I loved in the 1930s narrative. Dove's friend and boyfriend from the psychiatric hospital where she grew up, Dell.
Okay,
Bit of an outlaw and making ends meet. And I love Dell, and I would love to tell his story, but I've had a couple of other friends of mine say, you have to write a book about Dell.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Vivi is wondering how you handled the rejections from publishers, and did they give you feedback of why they were rejected?
Yeah. Actually they did. And every time that happens, rejection is a killer. It is. And it's almost like no matter how many times, how successful you've been, or how many times you've had, written a book, and it's just a killer. It just can really knock you back. But I will say there were some publishers who were gracious enough to tell me why.
Yeah.
Agent, and that was very helpful. And I actually did some rewrites based on their comments.
Yeah.
So you're always really thankful when somebody takes the time to say, I'm not just throwing this back in your face. I actually want to, give you some constructive criticism. But it's hard.
To keep going as well after getting rejections.
And it helps a lot to have I'm really thankful for my writer friends. I have several that live nearby and others that I've connected with online, but it helps a lot because they really understand it, and there's always somebody to talk to, and to just they say, get back up on the horse, do it, and so that's been a real lifesaver for me.
It must help having friends that have been through similar experiences as well, that you can share it with.
The rejection doesn't end. There's always kind of new and different way. You're always going to get that 1-star review. You just make everybody happy. So you just have to kind of keep your focus on doing what is in your heart to do.
Yeah. And I think before you said that you had 2 books you'd written before you got your 3rd published. Do you still have those 2 unpublished?
Yeah, they're still unpublished, and they shall always be unpublished.
You've never thought of going back and doing anything to them?
Yeah, no, I don't think they were meant to be. I call it, in Shakespeare you talk, or in literature you talk about the protagonist having a fatal flaw. I think those books had a fatal flaw, and I don't think they could have been fixed. And they were also in a different genre.
Oh, really?
They were
okay.
romantic women's fiction, which is not really what I write now.
Yeah. So you were more finding your niche.
Yeah, and kind of learning how to write a book.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, you got to make some mistakes, I guess.
Yeah. And when you were going through all that process and trying to get something published, did you have someone who really encouraged you through that time?
My husband
Mm,
has always been very supportive,
mm.
and I would just be like, "Oh my gosh, is this ever gonna happen?" And what if I'm terrible and nobody will tell me? And there's all this self doubt. And and my kids were really actually very encouraging too. And
Mm,
they were teenagers and a little bit younger, and I think it was kind of good for them to see me really trying something and getting knocked down and getting back up again. And
mm.
but yeah, they were always really, really encouraging to me too.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm interested to know, like, I'm sure when you were doing the research for Reviving the Hawthorne Sisters, you found some really interesting things out. Is there anything you could share with us that maybe really surprised you that you found in your research?
Um, this, yeah, actually, I'm thinking of one thing in particular. Um, so this I found out more when I was writing the first book, Honeysuckle Girls, but I
Mm,
really delved into it in Hawthorne Sisters. But so I really researched the state mental hospital. It was called the Asylum
mm,
back then in the state of Alabama, and was shocked to learn, not shocked to learn that it was a terrible place where there were many abuses,
mm.
of course. I think we've all kind of come to know
To
those
know,
stories,
yeah.
but that there were a lot of children born there for various reasons who grew up their
Yeah, I was
whole
surprised in your book you had someone who did do that, which did I'd have to say that did surprise me.
that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
and then they would just eventually grow up and leave. But I mean, to
Mm,
spend your childhood in such a terrible dark place,
mm,
uh, unimaginable to
yeah,
me. So it's yeah, I that kind of stuff was really
yeah.
surprise
Mm.
yeah.
So did you find that was a reasonably common practice?
I no, I don't think it happened a whole lot,
Okay.
but I do think there were instances,
Yeah.
and definitely instances of people running away, um, and oh, the other thing that I found in research, which I was researching about the Great Depression in the 30s, and kind of when Dove runs away from the hospital, she kind of joins up with this kid gang,
Mm,
like this gang of children who they were either orphans or their parents were like, we can't afford to feed you, so you're on your own. Good luck.
mm,
And so there were these gangs of children just kind of roaming around and like either begging or, stealing things and, coming up with all sorts of tricks of the trade to
mm. To get money.
survive.
Yeah.
That was something that was shocking
Mm,
to me.
mm, yeah.
Yeah, sad.
Mm. Belinda's wondering if when you're writing you have a set routine you keep to.
Not anymore. Sometimes I'll do that just to kind of, because that kind of discipline definitely helps me power through. Like, I'm gonna write 1,000 to 2,000 words every
Mm,
day until
mm,
I'm through the first draft. Um, and that does kind of help me keep the momentum going, but for the most part I try not to be too regimented, and I just kind of try to, I can't write really early in the morning,
mm,
because I wake up slow. I'm not great in the morning. I gotta like get my coffee and like watch a little news and ease into the day. But and I can't write at night either, late at night, because I'm like brain dead. I can't think. But so afternoon is definitely like late morning to afternoon is my time. But I'm pretty loose about it because after having written 5 books, I kind of trust myself a little more, and I trust the process. I know I can do it. I know I can finish a book, so I'm not so scared to.
Yeah. And is writing your full-time job now, or are you still doing some of your other work?
It's definitely. I was when my kids were home. I have one kid still living at home, but when they were all there, I was like full-time mom and writing, when they were in school. And as they've kind of grown up and moved away, it's definitely given me a lot more time. I have way more time on my hands, but I'm still just writing full-time and aggravating my 18-year-old son.
I'm wondering if you could be one of the characters in your book for a day. What character would you choose?
I would choose. Okay, so the second book I wrote is called The Weight of Lies, and it's about the daughter of this really super, super famous horror novelist.
Okay,
and
yeah.
The mom is a diva, the novelist. She's made a ton of money, and she's become a celebrity, and everyone worships her, and she's a bit of a diva and a piece of work. And but the daughter's kind of grown up very spoiled and rich, and so I would either be the diva novelist or the daughter that gets to travel to all the fancy houses and live the life of a rich heiress.
Yeah,
that would
sounds great. And I'm interested in knowing what you like to read yourself, and maybe if there is something you've been reading lately you want to share with us.
Well, so I have this very eclectic, like I'm all over the place, and I never know what I'm gonna like or be in the mood for. Like I just have to try a lot of things. But I will say, when we were kind of locked down in the pandemic, I started reading a lot of romance. I started off reading romance when I was like, I don't know, 11, 12, 13, and read those, the Harlequin romances and loved them, and into my early 20s, but I kind of forgotten about romance and had moved on to suspense and thrillers. And so I have loved getting back to romance. And I also like to read older stuff, like classics. And rediscover older authors that I've never that I didn't read back when I should have, probably.
Yeah. I'm wondering what you hope readers will love about your books.
That's a really good question. Well, I hope that they will really love the sort of atmospheric settings, and that the characters, I hope that they will be entertained, by a twisty story, but also a story that has some like heart to it. And mostly I just want them to be really, really sucked into the world of the book, and the story that I'm telling. But I like that atmospheric thing. Want them to feel a little spooky shiver.
Yeah. And could you tell me, do you find I think you've written 5, did you say 5 books now? Do you find it gets easier the more you write?
No, it's crazy. I mean, I thought it would, but every book is completely different. It's like its own little child, it's like it's got its own little personality and quirks, and some of them come like really easily. They just kind of like flow out of you. And then there's some that you cannot, it's like you're struggling through each chapter. You know the story you want to tell, but for some reason it's not flowing. And then, I mean, this is like a joke with writers and a lot of my friends. They're like, does anybody know how to write a book? I just Googled how to write a book, because it's crazy. It's like, I should know how to do this. Like, there should be a formula, and there isn't. It's most unpredictable.
Yeah. And what about the time that it usually takes for you to write a book? Is it similar, or you found it?
I tend to write a first draft really quickly, like in about a month or two.
Yeah.
And like really messy. Like there's, character names aren't matching up, and I forget about characters, and they're big gaping plot holes, and but it's almost like I'm rushing to get it out while it's still really alive and bubbling in my brain. So I feel like I have to like tick, 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 and that's when I will like set a word count goal for myself every day, and I'm a little more disciplined because I'm like, gotta get it out. But then I put it aside, month and a half, 2 months, put it aside for a couple of weeks, and then go back, and then that is a slog. That first revision is usually a nightmare because of how messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you
being 6 to 8 months.
Okay. Yeah. And when you start, do you know the ending when you start?
Usually, yes.
Yeah.
I feel like, especially with a suspense or a mystery, I feel like for me, the ending is one of the most important aspects of those kind of books. Like, the reader wants and expects and deserves, just a crash bang awesome explosion ending that either has a great twist or has like a real emotional punch, or just something really special and different. And so I feel like if I don't have that in mind, it may not be a book. Do you know what I mean? Like, it may not be.
Yeah,
it may not.
So,
now, and I will say, like, as I write, sometimes that ending will change a little bit, but I like to know my destination.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
But,
and like Reviving the Hawthorne Sisters was like a dual timeline. Is that how your other novels are, or?
Only, I think, Honeysuckle Girls was a dual timeline. Weight of Lies had a kind of dual thing going, but it's not really. It was I take that back. It was a timeline, a dual timeline. And it was also excerpts of the actual horror novel, just like little paragraphs. And that's it, I think. Yeah.
So the one about the horror novel and the ones with historical things in it, do you use any real characters in that?
No.
So the horror novelist was someone you just made up?
Completely made up. Yes.
Yeah.
Completely. And I may reference that she became very famous in the 70s. So I referenced Rosemary's Baby and Carrie, by Stephen King.
Yeah.
And so I reference those, but they're not characters.
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone is fictional.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me today. It's been great talking to you, and great to have you back again in our group. Just
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be talking to people on the other side of the world. It's amazing.
And do you want to let people know how they can keep in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely. I'm on Facebook. You guys just look for me. I've got like an author page, but then I have a personal profile too that I spend more time on. It's just Emily Carpenter. I'm on Twitter at Emily D. Carpenter, and I'm on Instagram at emily.d.c.
Well, thanks so much, and hopefully we can have you be able to talk to you again another time.
Anytime. I will run my mouth anytime.
And thanks so much for everyone who joined in and the questions that people asked.
Yeah, thanks guys. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.